Roger Williams University is hosting a crisis management seminar on May 3rd at their Providence campus. Crises, whether a natural disaster, cyber attack, or financial instability, can have severe repercussions if not handled properly. This is where crisis management plays a pivotal role. Join Roger Williams MBA students and expert speakers to learn how to prepare for the unexpected. The program is totally free and open to the public. You can register online at rwu.edu/events/crisis-management-symposium. We welcome in studio Rhode Island's new housing secretary, Stefan Pryor.
Great to be back with you, Bill.
A pleasure. And we also are joined via phone by the United Way's Courtney Nicolato. I believe we have Courtney on the line. We'll see if we can get Courtney back online in just a matter of moments. In a couple of seconds, we're going to, not a couple of seconds, let's be honest, about a couple of minutes, we're going to open up the phones to you, the listeners, at 438-9776, 438-WPRO. I've already got a couple of emails and direct messages on social media. Any questions you have about housing, we're going to take public input on that. We're going to be a public service for you and all of you out there that may have any question that can range from the homeless questions through purchasing, renting, short-term rentals, zoning, you name it. Whatever the case may be, we will welcome your calls again. If you want to get in line now, feel free, 438-9776, 438-WPR. Okay, Courtney Nicolato joins us of the United Way. Good afternoon, Courtney.
Hello, Bill. Thanks for having me.
Very nice to see you. I think the last time we saw each other was on East Matunic Beach on a beautiful day.
I know.
Not much different weather from today. So
you're absolutely right.
All right, let's get down to business here because this is serious business. We've been talking about this in all kinds of different ways here on WPRO and my podcast. I mean, really across just every mom and pop diner in the state, no matter where you go, this is a conversation that's happening. Step one right now, you're the new housing secretary. What does your life look like right now in terms of the public service you're doing?
Well, this is perhaps the most important round of service that I've had, and I'm grateful for the opportunity granted by Governor McKee, and at the same time, I recognize that this is an important moment because we do have enormous challenges in Rhode Island, and those challenges range from the fact that at every income level, it's hard to find housing stock. Yeah. It's hard to find an apartment or a home of any description that people expected to find at a given price range available to them. Another part of the problem, a crucial part of the problem, is that there are too many unsheltered individuals in our state. Individuals and families experiencing homelessness. Not acceptable. We've got to do better. The upside is that in the course of doing this new job, there are magnificent partners who have been hard at it for a while and are looking for the opportunity for us to surge in the right direction to make progress. And Courtney Nicolato is definitely one of them as the head of the United Way. I think rare among United Ways, this Rhode Island branch with Courtney at the helm has made housing a major priority, appropriately so. The same with Neil Steinberg at the Rhode Island Foundation and so many housing professionals and advocates. So I do think that because of the magnitude of the challenges, we have a mandate and we have stakeholders who are ready to help us fulfill the mandate. So it's a now or never moment, and I think it's going to be now. I think we're going to find the way to make serious progress here, Bill. And one last note, I want to thank you for your podcasts. I've had the chance to listen to most, if not all of them. I think that quantity and quality of work is what we need to try to get at the heart of what's going on here and to solve these problems.
I appreciate that very much. And for the listeners at ripodcast.com, you can find a series of conversations that I had with stakeholders ranging from journalists to nonprofit organizations to folks who are in just about every aspect of housing, including a realtor who offers some interesting analysis as well. Courtney, you are that United Way of Rhode Island. Not you singularly, you represent and lead that organization. So from your standpoint, what needs to happen right now to get the housing market, to get the housing crisis dialed in?
Yeah, I know. It's a great question. And, I think it's important to know, and I'm sure everybody appreciates the fact that housing is complicated. The housing system is highly complicated and complex. as we at United Way, we kind of look at things. We want to dig into root causes to really understand where the challenges exist. And we've done that in housing. And the reason why we have a keen understanding or a validation of our assumption is because every single day we hear from Rhode Islanders who are housing insecure. We just announced a few weeks back that last year we took 81,000 phone calls from Rhode Islanders who believe they were housing insecure or concerned or evicted from their house and looking for another place to live. We take that with all of the data we see. We have one of the lowest vacancy rates in the city of Providence that we've ever had, et cetera, et cetera. And we see that, right? And I think that's validation. But really where the United Way, focuses its attention is what are the root causes? And we're seeing a couple of things. One, we've seen a generational underinvestment of housing and housing production in the state. I am thrilled that we are not seeing that right now. And the leadership of Speaker Sakachi and our leadership across, Governor McKee and others who have said, no, we understand that this has been a challenge and we're tackling it. The other thing is we never had a leader at the helm in the government focused on housing. And I'm thrilled that Stefan is in this seat because he has the fortitude and the experience. And, both Stefan and I are Jewish, the chutzpah to get it done. And, I think the other thing really that we see is we have to look at the structure and the infrastructure to which housing is built. And a lot of that is around policies and practices that 30 years ago maybe worked, but don't work today. And these are in the areas of zoning. This is in the area of kind of middle income housing, affordable housing. How do we make sure that the policies and practices really enhance or support flexibility for our local leaders to be able to do exactly what they want to do, which is build housing in our communities? But right now, there are policies and practices that aren't allowing it to happen in a way that I think folks want it to. And so it's a combination, as we think about systems, it's a combination of multitude of different things. And that's what United Way kind of takes the focus with everything that we focus our attention around. I also think it's critically important to know that housing is the underpinning and the foundational element to so much that I think all of us as Rhode Islanders want to have, right? We want to have a robust economy. Well, guess what? Housing is necessary for that to happen. We want new businesses to come into Rhode Island. Housing is critical for their employees to have a place to lay their heads, right? We want to ensure that kids have a place that they can call home, and we want to know that they can go to school every day, not worrying about where they want to or where they're going to lay their heads. Housing is a critical role. So this system that I'm so grateful that we have more than we ever have before, resources, commitment, collaboration to make happen, to mirror what Stefan said, now is the time.
Courtney Nicolato, United Way, Rhode Island. Stefan Pryor, new housing secretary. I'm Bill Bartholomew here in for Dan on WPRO. Secretary, you want to add to that thought?
Yes, just on capitalizing on the energy around getting things done starting now. I wanted to thank Courtney and Neil and their partners at LISC and others who have stepped up. And a little bit of recent news. They have formed a coalition to help the housing department get started in this, if you will, restart. We are aiming to get our footing rapidly and use the coming weeks, not months, to focus on three things: housing production, homelessness, and reorganizing government to be equal to the task. And they've brought on some consultants from BCG, no state money whatsoever. Philanthropic money only, and they're going to help to guide and steer this effort together, these Rhode Island organizations and this consulting group, to get us started with some oomph, get started with some capacity, en route to having, Bill, at long last, a housing plan. We're setting the table for a plan, but taking actions, quite frankly, even before we put together the full long-term plan, taking the obvious steps as pertains to production and homelessness and other related issues.
Yeah, and
so big thank you.
Pardon me. And I think that the big thing as well is production. I mean, let's be honest about it. In terms of housing stock, there's no question about it. That's a major factor. We hear the Speaker of the House frequently say it's a supply and demand issue.
It is, and we've pulled some of the figures just to make sure we know where we are. It's not a pretty picture. So in 1988, we in Rhode Island issued over 5,500 building permits for residential structures, meaning we had over 5,500 housing starts in Rhode Island. By 2005, that number dropped to a little bit under 3,000. So 5,500 down to less than 3,000. Last year, we just got a little bit above 1,200 starts. 5,500 in the 1980s down to closer to 1,000 in the modern era. That means that we have gone in the wrong direction with housing production in Rhode Island. And by some measures, we have the lowest per capita rate of housing growth in the United States. In other words, on a per capita basis, we have the fewest housing starts in the U.S. We must do better. Now, I'll say this, though, Bill. You've lived this. We've discussed this many times. Our economy is not perfect. But when 2 governors ago, an administration took office in 2015, the Raimondo administration, we had the highest unemployment rate in America, the worst.
Yep.
We dropped the unemployment rate among the best in the country. We saw one of the biggest decreases. We hit an all-time high number of jobs multiple times. We hit COVID. That obviously changed the dynamic. And then Moody's says we emerged with the strongest recovery in the Northeast coming out of COVID. Still plenty of imperfections. My point is we've been at the bottom before, i.e. with our economy. We can figure out ways to move to the point of being a leader in the field. We've got to do that with housing. It's going to take us some time. It won't be overnight. We can't instantaneously change this trend that I've just described since the 1980s, but we can take the right steps starting now.
Really great stuff. He's Stefan Pryor. He's the new housing secretary here in Rhode Island. We also have Courtney Nicolato on the line with us of the United Way. I'm Bill Bartholomew in for Dan. If you want to be a part of this program right now and ask the secretary a question, 438-9776, 438-WPRO, and we'll get to the calls in just a second. I want to mention something in Newport this week. Right now, on newsstands, Phil Colosino writes of a Newport City Council resolution that directs the city administration to study specific housing issues and report back to the council later on in this year. One of the mandates looks at other municipalities to determine if the annual fee for short-term rental permits should be increased. Another requires city staff to research expanding accessory dwelling units, like, you turn your garage into an in-law apartment, things like that. And then a comprehensive review of Newport zoning, code, and historic district laws. Newport has a major housing crisis. There's no question about it. You see it reflected in the working class population that there's been a diaspora out of Newport, essentially. How critical is the municipal level to solving the housing crisis?
Ultra crucial, and I'll say it's no coincidence that the brand new mayor of Newport, Cy, has already reached out, and we to him. We've spent time together in the office in Providence. We've spent time together out at a warming center going back the couple weekends ago when we had that terrible cold stretch. We were together at the Newport Warming Center that was stood up for the purpose. He's in the mix. The mayor's in the game, along with his fellow council members, including former Mayor Nicolato, really making it happen. So that makes all the difference. Your question was, how much does municipal leadership matter? They're demonstrating it already. We had, on our very first day, this goes back 2 weeks ago, this day, Monday, on our very first day, we met with Ernie Almonte, the executive director of the League of Cities and Towns. That was symbolically and practically important. We wanted to signal that our key partners would be with the League, with the municipalities of our state, parentheses. We also met with Courtney Nicolato on that day. Thank you, Courtney, and the United Way. But that starting point meeting with Ernie led to a meeting with, just last week, 25 communities represented in our housing offices in Providence to talk about how mayors, town managers, and other top town officials are already moving housing forward. Now, there are varying ways. Some communities are prioritizing affordable housing as traditionally defined. Some are prioritizing market rate or mixed income housing development. Some are focused on our seniors, some on our veterans. But we wanted to hear from them, where are they starting from? And then, very importantly, what are the barriers? What are the opportunities? What are the tools they need from the state? What concerns do they have? We heard it all. One of the best sessions, honestly, I've been in a lot of sessions with the league, and we have a fantastic league, but one of the best municipal dialogues I've ever been part of. We're going to make progress with cities and towns.
438-9776, 438-WPRO. You can also email me, bill@ripodcast.com. And Courtney, I don't know if you want to stick around for at least this segment of calls in case there's a relevant, or if you can stick around, I should ask. And if you can, that'd be great. Matthew in Coventry gets us started here in our call-in portion. Hi, Matthew.
Hi, what's going on, Bill, Stefan, Courtney? Hope you guys are having a great day.
Thanks for calling in.
Quick question. Thank you. I appreciate you having me. I was wondering if there would be a consideration for opening campgrounds year-round. Right now, they're shutting down around November and don't open back up till April. I think it would provide a good starting point for somebody who's on a single income and it's all they can afford, but is still a working-class citizen who's giving back to their community.
That's a creative idea, and that's what we're looking to create a list of, and thank you for sharing it.
And,
absolutely.
Yeah, and if I can just add, Matt, I really appreciate that. And I do think to this housing crisis, you know, and it is a crisis, let's be clear, right? Creativity is going to really matter, you know, and I think that we can all drive around our various communities and see places that maybe were great mills or great buildings prior to, or campgrounds that can be repurposed. And I do think that that's such a critical component of as we really tackle this head on.
Matthew, thanks.
It's just a really affordable way. Thanks, Bill. You guys have a great day.
Yeah, you too. And I think there's a really interesting notion there of, you saw it in the pandemic. I mean, this may just be Instagram my feed being blown up with this, but a lot of people who bought mobile homes, RVs, and made the decision to say, you know what, if I can work remotely, or perhaps I've saved up enough, or whatever the case is, I want to live on the road remotely, and sort of localizing that. There are people who view it as not out of desperation, but something that they enjoy, that they would want to live in that sort of creative, call it RV or even a converted vehicle type of approach.
Yeah, it really is an idea that merits our attention, and we are looking at different variations on that idea, to be honest with you, across a variety of possibilities. So please keep these ideas pouring in. And this may be a good prompt for me to say that something else that Courtney and I are working on is public input regarding the whole housing planning process. And this kind of creativity is exactly what we want to bring forward. Doesn't mean that we'll accept every idea or that we can finance every idea, but every idea ought to be floated, and the public ought to have a chance to forge the solutions here, give us feedback on the ideas that we're generating, because government certainly doesn't have all the answers. Lord knows no one has solved this problem yet. So we're going to be, starting in about a month, going out even more formally and fully and beginning public input sessions. We're going to have a launch session for that purpose in about a month. We had a planning convening, just a group of stakeholders, housing professionals, advocates, and others at Courtney's offices, the United Way, about a week ago, maybe a little longer, and we have hashed this out a little bit, and that first session is going to have breakout groups, and then we're going to go on and do some other sessions, and those sessions will help to inform that very important strategic planning process that's going to yield a state plan. So just throwing that out there to say this radio interview and this input is the starting point, much more to come.
Really good stuff. 438-9776, 438-WPRO. Steve is in Warwick. Hi, Steve.
Hi, good afternoon. Thank you for taking my call. I was wondering, Stefan, what are your thoughts about the Fane Tower in downtown Providence, and how do you stand on that proposed project?
Yeah, I think that it's at a pivotal point. The Fane Tower has been in discussions for years, plural, as you know. And the challenge at the moment is that the owner is aiming to redesign the tower dramatically. That is in design review. I don't want to prejudge that. That's before the 195 Commission, where it ought to be. And that commission's had a lot of detailed conversations with the owner over time. There's a second question that I think needs to be answered beyond design review, which is, can it be fully financed? Which is to say, once the project gets started, will it get finished? The last thing we need is a partially built structure in our midst. Lord knows we've had those before in Rhode Island. Sometimes it takes us decades to complete if it doesn't stay in the construction process all the way through to completion in an ordinary, maybe couple year stretch of time. So those questions, from my perspective, those questions need to be answered as the most crucial questions before us. I will say that as a general matter, I think that it's important that we build more housing in Rhode Island. That doesn't mean that any project is a good project. That should not be our position.
Is there a timeline for that structure?
Well, there needs to be. I believe that the agreement with the 195 Commission is nearly at an end. So the commission has a go, no-go decision on an extension. And my recommendation to them is that the two questions I've just referenced be centerpieces of their dialogue: design review and financeability.
Is the 195 Commission the final say on that decision?
Yeah, essentially yes. There are other components that are in play, but essentially yes. They are the center of the dialogue.
Steve, appreciate the call very much. A great question there as we look at our infrastructure from really all levels. I mean, this is a crisis that ranges from the unhoused to new luxury developments, everything in between. That's the conversation we're having today. It's obviously not something we're going to solve in 1 hour. And look, I'll say this, I think the state is in good hands with you in this role. It's something that I think a lot of people feel a sigh of relief. And I think the number one thing is your communication ability and your understanding of the ebb and flow and nuances of government. And absolutely. So with that being the case, let's see what the people have to say. Let's get it going right away. Sue is in Coventry, depending on your preference. Hi, Sue.
Oh, hi. Thank you for taking my call. And like you, I have full confidence in Mr. Pryor, and I'm glad that they put him in this job. Anyway, my question is, I and a lot of people in the Coventry, West Greenwich area, we live kind of in a rural area, so we don't have, the pressing problem as in the urban area of getting housing. Our problems here are housing repairs for elderly, especially low-income elderly on Medicare and Medicaid. Years ago, my father, we lived in West Warwick, and he volunteered with the senior center. They had a program in the 70s and 80s where they had grants that came in, I think from HUD in Washington. The state matched some of the funds. The elderly filled out applications. They were able to get help with like new roofs, window replacements, siding. Because the problem here is a lot of people have housing, thank God, but it's old and it needs repairs. And a girl that I talked to, well, I should say a woman, a few months ago said, I might have to sell my house because it's all paid off. But she said, I don't have the money for a new roof and all these repairs, and I don't know where to go for help. She said, ever since COVID started, all of those agencies seem to be closed down or they're just not available. And she said it would sure be nice to have something to help us. So I'm asking either Mr. Pryor or Miss Courtney if they know of any programs like that.
Yeah, there has been.
Hey, Stefan, would you mind if I take this
I wouldn't
one?
mind at all. I'd love it if you did.
Thank you. So I really appreciate you feeling, and you're so right. There are so many that we hear from at United Way of folks that say, hey, my house needs X, Y, and Z, or I can't live there anymore. And the last thing we want is to lose inventory, right, when we're trying to gain inventory, and we want folks to be safe. There is a program called The Point. It's actually a program that United Way runs on behalf of the Office of Healthy Aging. We work with older adults, folks experiencing disabilities, to help figure out solve some of these challenges. One of the things that we take great pride in is we assess all the various different programs that are out there today to determine who's eligible for what are the criteria, what geographic location do folks go to, et cetera, et cetera. So all you would need to do is call 211, or you can call 401-462-4444. And again, that's 401-462-4444. And my team can help find out if there's a program that works for you and your needs.
Thanks a lot, Sue. Really appreciate your input there. And again, that number 211 is a critical one. Look, keeping people in their homes, that's so important.
It is.
It includes people who are behind on their rent. It includes people who have properties that are nearing blight conditions, whatever it may be. We got to keep people in their homes if possible.
We do, and Courtney was eloquent on the programming that already exists, and you can see the exemplary way the United Way is working with these challenges. We're interested in seeing whether there could be further investments in home repair. It's something that we're exploring. I'm only a couple weeks in, but there was some discussions around the use of the $250 million allocated for housing as to the potential use for this purpose. I want to also, you made the right move in kind of broadening the point, Bill, to helping folks stay in their homes. And there's a lot that can be done around that. There's, first of all, related to evictions, especially for folks who may be more vulnerable, have lower income levels, whether there's adequate legal services available to them, something we're exploring. We explored this question during COVID. Now I think it's time to really explore the question. And there's a variety of ways we can address the issue. So it's got to be a key category.
Yeah, no question about it. I think in Providence, on the municipal level, there's free legal services for folks facing eviction. Something to think about there, access to as much, again, a lot of people will frame this, you're trying to cheat the system or punish landlords. No, we're trying to come up with a robust way to move forward. 438-9776, 438 WPRO. You can also email me, bill@ripodcast.com. Bob is in North Smithfield. Hi, Bob.
Yes, hi, Secretary Pryor. Question I have for you is that every year the homeless has been costing us millions upon millions of dollars. They set people up in hotels and the like. My contention is the state doesn't do enough for dealing with such as.
Sorry, Bob, I'm going to stop you right there just because we weren't able to hear your phone cut out, and so the critical part of your question got cut off. If you could just start the question again.
Okay. For Secretary Pryor, the situation in the state is that they don't utilize long-term planning very well. I know there are places that can be purchased. For example, I believe there was a motel in Warwick that was on the auction block. If the state invested long-term in those kind of projects, instead of just basically spending money and with no return, at least they can count on X amount of rooms, per year, and also they could probably be run by a nonprofit.
You're exactly right. I'm so glad that you raised this, sir. So I should say Governor McKee is very focused on when the price is right and when there's a real opportunity, purchasing properties. So Governor McKee has included in his proposed budget to the General Assembly $30 million more for investments in properties that can help to house individuals and families experiencing homelessness, as well as other vulnerable families, lower income families. And the idea would be for there to be professional management in concert with well-respected organizations that know how to get the job done. So you're spot on. Now, we won't just buy at any price, and we won't take a property that's going to need, renovations in a way that's cost prohibitive. But if there's a smart move, that's a purchase, we're going to do it. So thank you very much for raising that.
Thanks a lot, Bob.
Thank you.
Yep, appreciate the call. You can take Bob's line at 438-9776. That's 438-WPRO if you want to speak with the housing secretary. If you want to speak with the United Way. We are in the midst of a public input session on really what I think everyone would frame as one of the great problems to solve, and that is housing here in Rhode Island. And look, this is a global conversation, but we're hyper-focused on Rhode Island today, and I think we have the opportunity, being a small state, to be a model for other places, whether it's reflected in our management of the homeless crisis, reflected in our management of the working class, for lack of a better term, middle housing, and balancing the whole system. We have a chance to not only solve this, but also to be a model on a global level. I really believe that, and I hope you do as well out there. And again, 438-9776, 438-WPRO. Jim is in Warwick. Hi, Jim.
Hi.
What's happening?
I got a question. Going back in the 60s, my folks lived in apartments that were paying like $60 a month, and I know it's astronomically high to find anything, even for people that make a good wage per year. And I think the state and the towns missed the chance to put up enough housing for the people that don't make the big monies.
I think we would all agree, and that's fundamental to our challenge right now, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is.
Yeah, I would. I'm too bad I couldn't just say, let's go back to the 60s and everybody will have a place to live, $60 or a little more. It's kind of ridiculous. I don't know. I mean, I'm retired now, but I played it smart. I made a point to buy a house. I don't care if I have to work 3 jobs. I'm going to pay it off, and I'm going to live in this house. Otherwise, I'd be out on the street somewhere sleeping, or move out of the state.
Yeah, Courtney, do you have a thought there?
Yeah, well, first, I don't want either of those things to happen to you. But, you bring up a great point. One of the things that when we talk about affordable housing, I think that there are assumptions or perceptions that folks might make when they think about affordable housing. And they're mainly for folks experiencing homelessness, which, don't get me wrong, making sure that we have transitional housing to get folks stabilized is so important. But when we're talking about affordable housing, we're talking about our nurses, our teachers. We're talking about folks in the trades. We're talking about, folks who are working 2-3 jobs, but right now housing is so unattainable for them. And not just buying a home, which is a dream for so many, but it's also renting a home. Last number that I heard, and Stefan might know different, but the last vacancy rate number I heard in Providence was less than 1%. And on average, a healthy vacancy rate in Rhode Island or in any community is about 7 to 8%. And so we're dramatically lower than we should be. And when we were talking about buying homes, my mother-in-law and father-in-law bought a home in the 70s for $29,000, right? And we're able to have a mortgage celebration party and pay that off because that was attainable. It's not anymore for so many, and that's what we're trying to fix, because the supply and demand issue, as we've been talking about it, is an incredibly bad problem, an incredibly big challenge that we need to overcome. I want to make sure that every Rhode Islander, 1, stays in Rhode Island, 2, is safe in Rhode Island, and we can create an economic environment that allows people to thrive. And right now, housing, education, other critical areas facing our state is not advantageous to that.
Jim, appreciate the call very much. Great question. And it'd be nice to be able to pay $60 in rent. Let me know where that is. And even if it requires a time machine, might be the right move. 438-9776, 438-WPRO. A couple more minutes left with Stefan Pryor. He's our housing secretary here in Rhode Island, and Courtney Nicolato of the United Way. Paul is in Warwick. Hi, Paul.
Hi. Okay, so we have a ton of empty mills in Rhode Island. My son lives in a converted mill up in Manchester, New Hampshire. $1,000 a month for a one-bedroom apartment. Down here, all the mills that they're converting, they put all the bells and whistles: granite countertops, stainless steel appliances, exercise room, whoopie-doo-doo, this, that, and the other thing, and all the extras. So why can't we convert some of these mills to just basic, simple, affordable housing like they did up in New Hampshire?
I think we can. Thank you for the question. I think we can. We have beautiful mills that can be historic settings for housing, and I think they should be a target for us. I also think, by the way, Bill, in one of your podcasts, you started to talk with one of your guests about malls and
Yes.
commercial strips.
Yep.
And there was just a convening that Courtney and I were both part of by Grow Smart Rhode Island on transportation-oriented development, which is, a way of expressing near train stations and near bus stops. I think that whether you're talking about an old factory or whether you're talking about an aging mall complex, we've got to do conversions. And on main streets, there's Class C office space, meaning outmoded office space, living on top of the retail shops that we all shop at all the time. That stuff should be converted into residential too. I think there's an enormous opportunity here, and I agree with the caller here. It doesn't have to be fancy. It can be at the right price points for people, everyday people, to access it. I think that's great. And I also want to point out that if we do it right, in some of these cases, more people are doing it the way I believe you are, Bill, live-work arrangements.
Yes.
Where, you live and work out of the same place. More people across the whole world are doing that. I think if we do these kinds of renovations right, even if we do new construction right, we can create environments that are cutting edge without too much extra investment, where there's the kind of spaces you want to work out of. Maybe for some people who are office-based employees, but the offices are going away, in the complex, there might be conference rooms, or there might be Wi-Fi accessibility. Or maybe, to get back to the caller's point, maybe it's just a straight-up conversion to some straightforward housing. But we have some real opportunities here, and I think we can show the rest of the country how it's done if we do it right.
I completely agree, and you're right. That is where I'm based out of in Providence. I have a space that's a work-live environment. It's awesome. I have a podcast studio in there. We've got a music space. We've got and it's comfortable. It's large, and I would not likely be able to maintain a full spectrum studio and a large living space in Providence, but put them together, zone it properly, figure out things to make it work, and create an environment that is also a creative environment that nurtures our creative economy. And
exactly.
There's a lot of cyclical aspects to this. This is something I learned when I was in Brooklyn. At one point, I lived in a pickle factory that was still active. The smell of the hummus and pickles being manufactured wasn't that great. But working with those landlords to say, or property owners really at that point in time, to say, hey, wait a minute, you have a little bit of space over here that's untapped. What do you think about, if you pay for a shower situation, we'll live here, you'll get income, it'll generate activity that will then make the other blighted properties in this area more attractive. And now fast forward 10 years, it's a booming economy in an area that previously, you couldn't even get a cab to necessarily. So I think, and some would argue that's gentrification. I think it's something we have to be careful about. At the same time, it's better than empty space and people without the space that they desire.
You got it.
And a great example of that is when I grew up in Pawtucket, and my old grammar school was Our Lady of Consolation, and the school closed down, I would say, in the early 2000s, and was abandoned on Webster Street right off of Broadway. And a few years back, I think it was in 2018, 2019, the Pawtucket Central Falls Development bought it and recreated my grammar school to be affordable housing units, condos that are at federal rates. So, that just brought me so much joy. One, to see where I grew up now into what leads into what I do every day. But that creativity, I see in a lot of places in Rhode Island. We have an ability now to really take that lead right? I think what Linda Weissenberger and the team at PCF are doing is such a prime example of what we could be doing in other communities. There are abandoned mills. There are places where there are abandoned buildings. We could be repurposing these and really, really boosting up main streets, that are desperately needed. I think the other thing that I have heard about things like mills and repurposing mills, there's a lot of conversation around parking. And, I would encourage us to rethink or think creatively about parking, especially as it relates to those areas that are right on, bus lines or train lines. Folks may not want to have 3 or 4 cars. They may only have one, but zoning regulations today, and we're looking to hopefully modernize these, require a number of parking spaces above and beyond, I think, what the norm is now. And so these are the types of things that can help really catapult, small things that can help catapult production.
Really great stuff there. On that point, Peter emails me, can you ask the Secretary about an update on the city's land bank program and if North Main Street is on anyone's radar with respect to being a potential site for affordable housing builds? That's an acute question. I don't know if that.
And that's a city question. So I'm happy to keep that question and ask Mayor Smiley about it. But I can tell you that there are land bank structures both at the municipal level and Rhode Island Housing, a separate entity from the Housing Department. But Rhode Island Housing also has a land bank. So we should keep these ideas in mind and use those strategies. But we'll be happy to share that question with Providence.
438-9776, 438-WPRO. If you have a question for Rhode Island's Housing Secretary, if you have a question for the United Way's Courtney Nicolato, feel free to give us a buzz. We have a couple more minutes here. Ron is in North Providence. Hi, Ron.
Hi. Good afternoon to all you three people. Very interested, but I want to ask Mr. Pryor something. I'm not putting you on the spot, but how many people or how many residents would you think there will be at, the Dexter Manor?
Oh, I just don't have the answer to that, sir.
Yeah, I don't know if it's 100, 200, 300, 400. But my personal opinion is to build more high-rises on state property. In New York, the Bronx, this, that. You got a lot of people can live in bigger buildings. That's how I would say some of this will go away.
Ron, I just to be clear, I'm not even sure. Is Dexter Man? What is that? Is that in North Providence or what is that? I'm personally not sure.
Okay, Bill. Dexter Manor is a high rise.
Got it.
It's on Broad Street, but I'm not talking about Dexter. I'm talking about just building bigger high rises on state property. We got a lot of property up at the prison. We got other properties. Build a nice high rise way up. Put 2,000 families in there or whatever.
Yep. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I can tell you from the state perspective, we're very open to building tall, and a lot of times that'll make the most sense for the way to maximize, a piece of state land or any piece of property. Of course, you always have to make sure it does make financial sense. And interestingly, sometimes in the construction trades, they call it either stick-built or steel structure, and sometimes steel will not pay for itself at certain price points, so you're better going with stick-built, meaning just wood, which keeps you lower. So my point is, sometimes you'll see us making decisions to finance a structure that doesn't look like it's the tallest that could possibly exist on the site, but actually that's the kind of structure that will pay for itself and will keep the rental costs or even the purchase costs affordable for people. That's all additional information. The big answer to you is yes, we would certainly consider and will be pursuing tall structures whenever we can, and they actually make sense.
He's Rhode Island's Housing Secretary, Stefan Pryor. We also are joined by Courtney Nicolato of the United Way, Rhode Island. Thank you both so much for doing this.
Our pleasure. Really glad to. Thanks for having us, Bill.
Happy to.
Yeah, this was great.
Absolutely.
And it feels like, when you get into a hive mind type of situation with all of the stakeholders, which in this case is all of the people of this region, it authenticates the process a little bit. It's not behind closed doors.
Exactly.
It's for the public's eyes and ears, and we appreciate it very much. So thanks for your time. And thanks to all of you who joined us here today. And if you have an additional question, feel free to email it, bill@ripodcast.com.
At HealthSource RI for Employers, we provide access to health insurance to more than 1,100 local businesses and nonprofits, and 96% of them renew through us every year. Maybe it's our choice of 19 different health plans, our 10 years of customizing solutions, or our one local team of dedicated experts helping employers find quality health insurance. See how our numbers stack up for you. Learn more at healthsourceri.com/employers.